absorb the glucose because the insulin has become ineffective. Well, the medium-chain fatty acids in coconut oil resensitize the cells of the body so that they are able to use the insulin to bring in the glucose, which is very important because, that's the basic problem with type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance, and coconut oil helps to reverse that. And it's interesting. When I first published my very first book on coconut oil, I had a man call me up, and he told me he was diabetic, and he was reading my book, and he started taking coconut oil every day. And he said that within about 10 days, the feeling in his feet had returned because, one of the symptoms of diabetes is the loss of feeling in the feet. And it took him about 10 days of using coconut oil in order that caused a reversal of that. And he probably hadn't had feeling in his feet for several years, and yet just 10 days on coconut oil reversed that. And I thought that was fantastic. But since then, many other people who are diabetics have contacted me and reported the exact same thing. Once they start taking coconut oil, in about 2 weeks or so, it actually reverses these symptoms caused by their diabetes.
How interesting. At what point do people experience a potential detox situation in the body when they're, let's say, having 2 or 3 tablespoons of coconut oil a day? Why do they detox, and what does this mean?
That's an interesting question because, sometimes people, they learn about the health benefits of coconut oil, and so they start taking coconut oil, and then their health gets worse. They start coming down with flu-like symptoms, or they start developing rashes, or they get diarrhea or constipation or vomiting, upset stomach, or any other type of symptom, and they kind of think one of two things. Either they're sick or they're allergic to coconut, and neither one of those are the case. And what's happening is they're detoxing. Coconut oil has a very potent detoxing effect on the body. It helps the body cleanse out toxins and poisons, and that's what's happening during a detox. The body is actually becoming healthier. It's becoming strong enough to remove the accumulation of toxins that have been building up in the body. And the only way to remove it is either through the mouth and, the normal ways of elimination. And so through the skin, diarrhea, all these type of things some people may experience when they start adding coconut oil in their diet. Now, some people may experience it the first time they use coconut oil, while others, it may take a month. And in others, they may not experience any detox symptoms at all. So it's very variable depending on the person, how toxic the person is, and how much coconut oil they're actually taking at a time.
I thought that was a very interesting part of having coconut oil being part of your daily diet. What are the challenges that you've had as an author when you first released your studies and your research about coconut oil? What kind of challenges have you faced personally and professionally?
Well, when I was writing this book, I knew from the very beginning that I would have a hard time because the first book I wrote, came out like 12 years ago, and back then no one knew anything at all about coconut oil. The only thing, when someone said coconut oil to them, the first thing they thought of was saturated fat, heart disease. And so I knew I had this problem that I was going to have to overcome. But I knew that coconut oil was so good and had so many health benefits that I had to tell people about it. So I did publish the book. And it was really kind of hard to get people to read it because they would look at coconut oil, the miracles of coconut oil, they couldn't understand how a saturated fat could be healthy. And so I couldn't get any reviews for it. People, poo-pooed the book. But what I had going for it is that if I could get someone to read the book, and they did see all the evidence because I put in all the references to the medical studies, everything in that book was based on the research I found from medical studies and from my own experience. And so it was very scientifically based. And so if someone read the book, they would become a convert. In fact, one story is I gave the book to one of my neighbors, and he was a little reluctant, but once he read it, he became very excited, and he started telling other people. And he went to his nutritionist, who has a PhD in nutrition, and he said, "Oh, you've got to read this book." And she looked at it and said, "No, that's just someone's opinion. I don't believe in it." "Well, you haven't even read it." Well, and he said, "No, I'm not going to read it." And so he kind of forced her, to accept it and to read it. And so he came back a week later and said, "Did you read that book?" And she hadn't read it. And he said, "You've got to read this book." And she resisted. And basically he kind of twisted her arm, and so she promised to look at it. And so he left, and then, just to satisfy him, because she knew he was going to ask her next time he came back, so she was starting to flip through it, and it kind of caught her eye, and so she started reading it. And as she was very chemistry-oriented, and I have some very basic chemistry in there about the medium-chain fatty acids. And she went through that and says, "Well, yes, this all makes sense. This is true." And it sparked her interest, and so she read it from cover to cover in about 2 days, and then she started calling me up and says, "I read your book. It's fantastic. I want to know more." And so from that day forward, she started recommending that book to all of her clients. So she became a convert. And that's what happened, basically by word of mouth. If someone read the book, then they became a convert. And it's just kind of ballooned from then and kind of spread out.
How interesting. I think this will take many people by surprise.
I do too, because, we've mentioned some of the health benefits, but we haven't even covered all of them. I mean, there's many health benefits, and we haven't even gone into real, detail on some of these, and the book contains the details, and it's fascinating.
Were you nervous a little bit to write about how effective it is with curing things? Because, you're not, quote, allowed to say anything cures anything in the United States of America.
Basically, yes. But, we do have some freedoms, and so I could, take some steps in that. And before I even wrote the book, I used it on myself, and I recommended it to other people, and I saw the benefits it was doing to other people. I've seen it clear up hemorrhoids, stop bladder infections, remove cancerous and precancerous skin lesions, help people lose weight, give people more energy. I mean, I saw these things before I actually wrote the book, so I knew that they were effective and that they worked.
Explain what a naturopath is and does.
Well, basically, it's like a doctor, but instead of using drugs and surgeries and radiation and harmful things like that, we only use non-harmful modalities. For example, we use diet, we use nutrition and exercise, body work to treat the patient.
Okay, because I think a lot of people don't know what a naturopath is and does, and how a naturopath is distinct from a regular MD. What are your plans for the future, Bruce?
Well, I wrote that first book, and I thought that was probably going to be my only book on coconut. But I've continued to research coconut, and as I've done so, I've uncovered more interesting things about the coconut and what coconut oil and other coconut products, like coconut water and coconut meat can do. And so that led me to write additional books, either on coconut or on health problems in which coconut can be part of the solution. For example, arthritis. I have a book on arthritis where coconut's not the full solution, but it's part of the solution. And most recently, my book on Alzheimer's disease, which is really interesting because this is fairly new research that has been done about the medium-chain fatty acids and actually how they affect the brain and how you can not only prevent Alzheimer's but actually reverse it. And this is really exciting. And so I'm doing more research in this avenue.
Well, that strikes a chord with me because I lost my mother to Alzheimer's. And even with all